This is Mike from GoCellPhoneRepair.com, and today we're going to replace the charging port on an iPhone 5S. So I have a phone here which does not power up. The battery is completely discharged, and when I plug it in, I'm not getting anything, so that would lead me to believe that the charging port has some sort of issue. Now, it could be something else in the phone, so we're going to test that theory before we do the full installation, but a lot of times these lightning ports and pretty much any charging ports in general tend to accumulate debris on the inside. Sometimes they get wet. There are a number of different things that can cause a problem. But if we actually replace the entire port, which is also attached to the headset jack and the microphone charging port, and part of the antenna system, this is all going to be replaced, and that should correct the problem. Of course, we will test to make sure that is the case before we put it all the way in. So down here on the bottom, you're going to have your two pentalobe screws right next to the lightning port, and go ahead and remove those first. Next thing we need to do is just open the bottom of the phone enough so that we can disconnect the fingerprint reader. So remember, there is a cable directly behind this button, and it only has a certain amount of slack, so you can't go too far on the inside. What I'll typically do is start at the bottom here by prying in between the plastic frame and the metal, just enough to open this up so that we can get a better pry tool on the inside. If you use a metal tool like this, to pry the phone open from the bottom, it is possible to scar the inside of the metal piece here. So there are a few different ways that you can open this up. Now, once you've got the screws out of the bottom, of course, occasionally you can take a suction cup, and this one's pretty small. I'm not sure if it's going to be strong enough, but usually if you're very careful, you can pull this open just enough to get a very small pry tool into the bottom end of the phone. Of course, if your phone has never been opened up before, it's going to be a really tight fit and kind of tough to open. Now, they sell some bigger suction cups. The only problem is the strongest one I've seen is actually a little bit too wide for the phone. There is a special tool that's made to open these up, but again, one of the problems here is that if you've got a cracked screen, it's very difficult for a suction cup to get a grip on here. So I've actually seen people pull back on this enough to the point where you can get, again, a small pry tool underneath the glass, but I still find that my favorite tool is a dulled razor blade like this. If you want to be completely safe, taking a look at the inside of the case, you'll see that there is probably a good, I'm going to say maybe a 32nd or a 16th of an inch where you can actually go in between the plastic frame and the metal frame without doing any damage. You don't want to jam way down inside of there. But if you take this, it actually gives you enough leverage, and it goes in deep enough inside the metal, beneath the plastic, so you can just very gently lift it open. And I'm going to say that's probably the best way I've found to get this thing started. And then, of course, if you don't want to use your fingernail, you want to have a small pry tool like this just after you've got it opened up, and then you can kind of run around the length just like I continue to do in the video. So again, when it's all the way closed up, if you're very careful, probably the safest way to open this is to have a blade a little bit thinner than this pry tool, and instead of going in with the corner, you can go in all the way across just flat like this, very carefully, and you should be able to pop it open just like that. So you'll see this is just going to open up just a bit, and then we'll switch over to a softer tool. That way we can avoid any scratches to the metal frame, and of course we don't want to damage that plastic either. So you'll see that just run right up the edge here, and you don't have to go in very far, just enough to get it out of the housing. We'll do that on both sides, and be very careful down here at the bottom. You don't need to go very deep, and if you do, you can knock some things around on the inside. So we'll go up the other side, same way. Now again, do remember that there is a cable on the inside here, so as you start to pry this open, you'll see, let's get this around here, that little accordion type cable on the inside. So what we want to do is basically just lift this up enough so that we can kind of bring it down, because it does latch in at the top of the phone. Once we've got that disengaged, you'll have a little bit more room to work with, but not a whole lot. So again, do be careful. There is a plastic or a metal retaining clip on the inside here that we're going to have to pry away, and this can be a little bit tricky. You see we have just enough room to move this over so that you can kind of see this plate that I'm talking about right here, and it's got a little hinge, two little tabs here at the top and one down at the bottom that we're going to pop out of place here. So what you're going to do is very carefully go in towards the bottom of this, and make sure you're working in a clean environment, because these things every once in a while will pop out and fly across the room. But once we've disengaged that from the bottom, it will actually open up this way, and then we can pull the whole piece out, set that aside for the moment, and the next thing we want to do is actually disconnect the fingerprint scanner. So this little cable right down here is a pop connector. You can just kind of lift that straight up, and once that's disconnected, that will allow us to open this up a little bit further. Now what we want to do is, you can remove the entire display if you want to. I don't want to go that far, but what I do want to do when I open this up is make sure that I don't place any stress on these cables right up here. So what you want to do is find something you can kind of lean this up against. What we found actually works, believe it or not, is if you take a roll of masking tape, painter's tape, anything like that, you can kind of just keep that in place so it doesn't fall down or anything while you're working on the inside. Now I'm going to move it aside just for a minute so you can see that the next step is going to be disconnecting the battery. So first thing we want to do anytime we're working with electronics is remove any power sources. And in order to do that, we're going to have two screws here, a panel that comes out, and then we can disconnect the battery. And these are, of course, Phillips screws. We can go ahead and remove the panel. And then we will disconnect this terminal here. Very carefully, just lift it straight up towards the ceiling. And now we have no more power source there. So for the time being, I'm going to use this to hold the display so that it doesn't fall over, and again, not place any stress on those cables on the inside. In fact, this one seems to be kind of standing up on its own. Pretty well balanced. Okay, so if we take a look at our replacement part, first thing we want to do is make sure that we are addressing the correct problem. So my assumption is that this assembly needs to be replaced, but in order to test that theory, what I'm going to do is go ahead and disconnect the charging port, and you may need to add a little bit of heat, but this will actually peel straight down. So I'm going to go ahead and warm this up just a bit. That'll make it a little bit easier to peel this back this direction. Okay, so once we've got that old port disconnected, I'm going to go ahead and take the new replacement part, plug it in, and see if that solves the problem. Make sure you don't force this, take your time. Sometimes they're a little tricky to get lined up, but you don't want to force it in. If you do, you can actually damage the interface there. So now I've got the new charging port plugged in. I'm going to go ahead and reconnect the battery. Again, these things shift around a bit. And then I've got the display where I can kind of see what's going on, and I will connect my power supply to the new charging port and see if we get any signs of life. Later on in the video, you're going to see me trying to get past this little thing at the bottom of the battery. So I've actually removed the battery from the phone here, and there's a little plastic thing inside, and it kind of has a tendency to get stuck on the charging port itself when you're bringing it in and out. So this thing, it's not actually part of the battery. It's some little flap that they put inside here. I have no idea why. I guess it's to seal this off, but it's supposed to sit upright the way I had it initially. Now it's kind of sticking to the adhesive under where the batteries go. In any case, what we're going to do is we've already got the flex cable disconnected for the old charging port. We want to go in here and go ahead and disconnect the antenna wire. And then down at the bottom, you're going to have about 7 screws that need to come out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are a little hard to see, and they're very small. So these screws should all stick to your magnetized bit without any problems, but you want to keep them in order because they are all different sizes. So once you have all these screws out, you can go ahead and lift out the speaker assembly from the top. That kind of goes on top of the flex cable and goes underneath a few things here you'll see later on in the video. You may have to apply some heat here. There is some adhesive underneath. On this one, we're not too worried about the adhesive because this is a damaged charging port that we're replacing, but you can pretty much just kind of peel this out. And it sometimes has to maneuver down just a little bit this direction because it kind of locks in right there in the center. The first thing you're going to notice is that there are a few things that need to transfer over from the old charging port. There's a pad that goes behind the flex cable here. We're going to go ahead and move that over. And there is also a little rubber boot that goes down here on the microphone, and that actually routes the sound down from the bottom of the phone. So without this, people aren't going to be able to hear you when you're talking. Then we've also got this little mechanism here, which is stuck to the back of the fingerprint reader. So what we're going to do is just heat this up, and we should be able to peel it from the back. So it's pretty much going to lay this direction on top, and you can see it's already kind of moving around there. There's not a ton of adhesive behind this one. That just comes off, and hopefully there's enough adhesive to make this stick. If not, we'll have to add some later on. That's going to go just like this. And no, they did not put any adhesive on the back, so we'll have to cut a piece. Recommend using something like an old iPhone adhesive. Let's see if I can find a piece here. So if you've got something like this, this will typically work pretty well. I like to hold on to this. This is 3M 300 LSE. You can find this just about anywhere. I've got a few, actually a page on the website that shows you where you can find these adhesives, and we just need a very small piece, so any kind of precision scissors will work for cutting this, or you can use a box cutter on a smooth surface. The fun part, of course, is getting these two separated. So I'll usually go back to another thin blade, something like this, so that we can peel the wax paper off. And once you do that, this is the fun part. It's always going to, oh, looks like the adhesive actually came off on the blade. So this is probably best applied to the back of the cable. Again, this stuff is just sometimes a little tricky to work with, especially if you've had too much coffee. Right, so if we get that to stick on, and put it right there. Remember, this kind of folds over, so that's going to hold our fingerprint reader in place. And next we can remove this little rubber piece from the bottom, and you might have to heat this up a little bit. Then again, that one came off pretty easy. However, make sure you keep it facing the same direction, and you'll usually have a piece of tape on the back here that you can remove, and that will expose an adhesive that's underneath. And this is going to slide right back on, same way that we took it off. And that bends over a little bit, and again just routes the sound through the bottom of the phone. So now we've got everything moved over except for this little piece right here. So again, if you apply some heat, it's usually the easiest way to move it. And then take a thin object like a blade, and we can get underneath here. Usually, you can see this one's kind of off a bit. Notice that a lot with Apple lately. Things don't seem to line up as perfectly as they did in the past. But what this is going to do is help to keep this cable plugged in case the phone experiences any impact. It's also going to prevent that metal piece from grounding out on anything inside the phone. Okay, so a couple things we want to watch out for. One is this piece here. that likes to come out from the bottom. And then there's a very small washer here. It's a little hard to see, but there are washers around some of these threaded barrels, so you want to make sure you get those installed before you go too far. And after we've removed all of the adhesive covering, little plastic, you're going to have a lot of this stuff on the back of the new charging port you want to remove first. And then what we'll do is start by maneuvering this thing into position, just like this. And then I would recommend you add a couple of these screws to kind of stabilize things while you're working. So I'm going to start with these two larger ones at the upper end of the charging port. That way you don't have those washers underneath moving around, because they can actually block the screw from going back inside. Now from here we should be able to maneuver the headset jack back into position. You can see that it's kind of getting underneath the tape from the bottom of the battery, which is a little odd. Haven't had that happen before. But for that purpose, or for that reason, I'll actually go in with the top section of the headset jack first. And then you can see a little rubber boot popped off. So that's not going to work. This has got to be installed inside the phone, or we will not have any sound. So go ahead and take this out once more. See, this tape on the bottom of the battery for some reason keeps getting caught. It's not really staying where I want it to. I might add something to that later. So this piece is actually going to go right onto the microphone, just like this. And make sure that doesn't get shifted out of position while we install this, which of course is going to stick to a magnetized driver. That's a good thing about ESD tweezers. They are not magnetic, so you can move this stuff around without it sticking to your tools. And again, do be careful of that little piece right there. Tighten this down the rest of the way, and then what we're going to do is just fold this over. It's going to sit right about here. If it's off by a little bit, it's not going to be a problem. We do have some flexibility with that cable. And what we want to do now is make sure this is sticking down, and we'll remove the last piece of adhesive here. So that's going to interesting thing, our original cable is completely smooth up here at the top, while this one seems to have a little extra piece of something, I suppose. More adhesive on the top. Interesting, threw me off there for a second. So we'll lay this down for the moment, and then we're going to reinstall our speaker assembly, which of course has to go underneath two more screws that we have already put inside. Right, so let's get this antenna wire out of the way. And alright, so we've got two screws here that we want to go in last. believe the antenna wire is going to route right down to this crevice, so I want to make sure that that lines up properly and doesn't pinch the wire. And then of course this piece is going to go underneath. So if you take a look at this tab, let's see, this tab here is actually going underneath a part on the inside, and then we can route the cable, the antenna wire. It's actually going to come out from right about halfway through here, so right at this point, and then this should kind of slide in. And again, want to make sure we're not pinching anything, so it should sit in here nice and smooth. However, I believe what we're going to do is get this to go in from the top. So you've got another little tab. You've got two tabs here, one here and one here, and these are going to kind of route inside underneath. One last thing, we have a little pad on top of the antenna wire, so I'm going to go ahead and plug the antenna wire in first, and then we'll go ahead and add that on top of it. You see, these are always fun to try to keep that where you can see it. Getting this thing plugged in is really a matter of just kind of feeling around, looking at what you're doing, and very gently plugging it in. Too much pressure and you will bend this connection, and no more antenna. Sometimes you get lucky on these, other times it can be quite a bit of patience. Right, so we've got that plugged in. Next thing I want to do is take this sticker from the back, heat this up a little bit, and then we can transfer Alright, so this is the fun part. After we get the fingerprint reader plugged in down here, I know it's a little tricky to see. That just snaps into place. This little retaining panel has got to go in from this side first, and then this little tab at the bottom is going to lock in, and the tab locks in just about right here, so kind of over next to where this screw is. So you want to make sure you get this lined up straight. If you don't, it's not going to have anything to snap into. When it does, you just kind of pop that down, and that's going to keep it from coming unplugged inside of the phone. And from here we can go ahead and very carefully, remember we've got 3 tabs up here at the top, 1, 2, 3. These must go in underneath the top end of the phone, otherwise the screen will not install properly. And you never want to push very hard on this. It shouldn't be too difficult to get down inside. You can put a little bit of pressure along the edges, but never push down on the center. And if you just very carefully work back and forth, you may even have to kind of push upwards on the screen to get it to lock into the top. When you do, everything should snap together. And then, if we've got everything put together properly here, plug it in, and the phone will start charging. If you found the video helpful, hit the like button, share it with your friends, subscribe to my channel, and follow me on Twitter or Facebook. Post your questions in the comment section below or visit gocellphonerepair.com/forum. Thanks for watching.